a second authentication method. Yay. And yeah, we're using the afternoon stuff right this second, but I can change that real quick. I'm glad you guys are so excited about this.
David, can I request a form of authentication if you don't do it?
Is it one of the ones that's listed in Firebase?
Is Steam on Firebase?
No. Steam is not on Firebase. But, you know, so it's not something that, it's not something that Firebase is going to make super simple, but it is OAuth, and the API is not any more complicated than any of these others. So it's not any more complicated than any of these others. It's just that Firebase doesn't do it for you, basically. So, but, you know, the same basic steps of putting a callback somewhere in a Steam account or creating it like a Steam application ID and that kind of thing. Very similar process. So let's do Twitter, because I actually have a Twitter account. Yay. To complete setup, add this callback URL to your Twitter app configuration. Learn more. Hey, what happens if we click Learn More? Oh, look, it takes us to the Firebase docs to the section about authentication. And over in the left, under Web, we can see specific instructions for Twitter. Huh. Cool. Before you begin, add Firebase to your JavaScript project. Done. Register your app as a developer application on Twitter and get your app's API key and API secret. So this is much like the process that we did with GitHub. So let's click on Register Your App. It's going to take us to apps.twitter.com. Create a new app. Name. Make this a little bigger. Name is Note Herder S2 Morning for me. Description, a note-taking app. Website, I will again put in my GitHub pages URL here, now that that's a real thing. It's actually deployed somewhere. Callback URL. Now this is the part that we have to copy from Firebase, right? This thing. So make sure you copy that. Paste it in here. Agree to the Twitter developer agreement. I'm sure it's fine. Error. You must add your mobile phone to your Twitter profile before creating an application. You saw I already had an application in here. That was not the case just a couple months ago. Jerks. Okay, Google is super easy. Well, it is Firebase, right? So, okay. Yeah, enough of this bullcrap. So, I had not clicked enable yet, and I'm not going to right now. All right, Google. Set up Google sign in for your Android apps, which is not what we're doing, so. All right. Enable. Automatically configured on your connected iOS and web apps. It's just for Android app, they do some fancy thing. Save. Could it be that easy? So that's a new provider and stuff, right? So custom auth parameters, don't need it. So sign in with pop-up provider. It's just the provider is different. It's a Google provider object instead of the GitHub provider object, right? So let's see. I'm a little surprised it doesn't have a link straight. Oh, there it is, yeah. Authentication provider reference. Firebase auth provider. is the type of thing here. There is a list of those things somewhere in here. Google, so it is Google Auth Provider, each word capitalized, including the first. So what we would do back in base.js, where we have this GitHub provider, now we need to add another one. Export const Google provider equals new firebase.auth dot Google Auth Provider, and it is a constructor. So open close parens. So in sign in, we need to import that one as well. And then instead of hard coding this in here, what we'll do is we'll pass in provider as an argument to authenticate. And so for this button, we'll have an arrow function that calls authenticate and passes in GitHub provider. Sign in with GitHub. And we'll have another button that will pass in Google provider. Sign in with Google. And if we wanted them to be different colors for the different services, we could add another class to here and modify your style sheet. Yep. So now we have, it was just a button in here, right? Now it's two buttons, which means there has to be more. We need a single root element in our JSX, because that is a rule of XML. Also, it just doesn't make any sense. Okay, so let's sign out now. And we have sign in with GitHub and sign in with Google. I got a little error here. Sign in with pop-up failed, expected one argument, but got 0. Oops, yeah. So I passed this in, but then I didn't pass it on. So a fat lot of good that did me. No problem. Try again. Sign in with Google. Poppity pop up. Auth operation not allowed. The given sign-in provider is disabled. Under the sign-in method of the auth section, it is. Did I really not do that? That's Twitter. Blah, blah, blah. Oh, I switched back to morning. Whoops. No herd address to morning. Authentication, sign-in method, Google, enable, save. Clear out my console. Yay, choose an account. I have so many Google accounts, you guys. And of course, different UID now. So, different set of notes. Which gives me an opportunity actually to test that thing, our database rule. So, look at my data. I have this old stuff, but now I can't get to that anymore. Now it's all scoped under notes with a UID at that point. And a couple notes that I just added. If I sign out and sign back in with GitHub. Now what? Count already exists? Yeah, okay. So there is, I wondered about that. So in Firebase, there's an option to allow only one user account per email address, and my GitHub and my Google account use the same email address. One account per email address. I could change this. You may not want that. And then if you wanted it so that they could log in with either one and get the same set of notes, then you would need your own, you'd need to handle the authentication a little more manually. So now can I sign in with GitHub as the same person and get, yeah, a completely different set of notes? Good old uswords. Add another one. Whackety smackety do. Check out my data in Firebase. Now I have two different ones here. This is my GitHub user. So what if I copy my UID from Google and I change app.js temporarily to hard code that UID? Now to make sure I stop syncing and start syncing again, I will log back in again with GitHub and see what happens. I still see him. Did we update our rules for this? Notes, user ID. So it should be enforcing that the user ID matches. But it is happily showing my GitHub notes to my Google Notes to my GitHub user, it would seem. One more time. Yeah, so I'm still seeing those, which it should not be letting me do. Yeah. So, if you want to test your rules, you can run the simulator. Simulation type read. I seem to be able to read and write. Notes / my Google user ID. Authenticated, yes. Provider. Doesn't list it there. We'll say Twitter. Why not? UID. Where's my scroll bar? Okay, UID, fine. Yep, so it's a different UID, that's the point. Auth token payload, run. Simulated read allowed. Yeah. Run that again. Simulated read denied. So if I change this to Google and actually use this ID, so the more specific rule did not override that. I wonder if the order matters. Yeah. So yeah, if we had rules in there saying anyone who's authorized can read it, then it's going to allow that. So in some things like NTFS permissions, explicit denies overrule everything, but that is not the case here. So now my GitHub user should not be able to read my Google user's notes. So sign out again, sign back in, and I don't see them. And I can't write them either. Permission denied, I see. But if I stop hard coding this, because that's ridiculous, sign in with GitHub, then I see my GitHub user's notes, and all is well. So now we know that even if they somehow figure out a way to try to get to those other notes, they won't be allowed to do it. You absolutely have to log in as that user now. Yay! Permissions enforced at the database level. Add Google Authentication. Hey, speaking of which, you know what? Our README is kind of out of date. Or not our README. our base.example. Remember that? Base example JS is supposed to tell people how to make their base.js, and we've added stuff to that since we created this. So when you make a change to the one that doesn't get committed, make sure you change it to the one that does get committed too. So we have this new import, and we have all these lines here that are new since the last time we saved it. And those don't have any secret stuff in them. I suppose this could say your storage bucket, even though we're not using one. We're not using a messaging sender ID either. So you don't actually need those last two keys. I'm getting ready to push. Add Google Authentication and update freebase example config. Very good.